The following presentation was recorded live for CALLERLAB's 20th Annual Convention. This is tape number 24, Use of Equipment.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Heyman, and I'd like to welcome you to the presentation this afternoon on how to use your sound equipment. If you haven't received it, there are 3 handouts in the back. Certainly encourage you to take one or a couple of copies for friends. There's some very, very interesting information in there, and there are going to be some very, very interesting presentations this afternoon. We're going to allocate about 15 or 20 minutes each per presenter. There are 3 presenters. I am not presenting. I am moderating. We're going to try and allocate around 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, for each person to do a short presentation, and then we would like you to jump in with questions. If at any point during any of the presentations you have questions, certainly feel free to jump in. That individual who's presenting might say, I'll cover that in just a moment. What I'd like to do is first introduce all of our panel so that everybody knows, both in this room as well as the people listening on tape, who the individuals are on the panel. To my immediate left, to your far right, is Ervin Gross, well known in this industry. Ervin spent over 40 years with General Radio. He's written many articles and is a fellow of the Acoustical Society of America. He's a senior life member of the Institute of Electronic and Electrical Engineering, and was in fact, as I'm sure most of you know, the original designer of the original Yak Stack, certainly a pioneering effort in this industry, and that was in 1961, and he built that speaker for Earl Johnston. And I understand that Yak has recently recovered that speaker and now has that original speaker back. To my right, and in the center of the table, is Dick Henschel. Dick started calling in 1975. He joined Hilton Audio in 1967 while he was still in high school. It's actually hard to believe. He's been there a long, long time. He was the head of the technical department at Hilton for 10 years. He's sounded several national conventions, as well as certainly, as I'm sure you know, various state, local conventions. In 1986, he, along with his wife Vicki, purchased Hilton Audio, and they are now the sole owners of that company, and he is still actively calling for 2+ clubs in his own region. Our third presenter today, also well known to many of you, is Tom Dillander. Tom has been calling since 1973. He was previous co-owner of Keltone Speakers as well as Eagle Records. He is known for sounding conventions and festivals over the last 8 years, and he is currently, along with his wife Pam, the owner of Palomino Records Incorporated. Just for the record, my name is Bill Heyman. I've been calling since 1978 and have been a CALLERLAB member since whatever the appropriate third year after that is. And since 1982, have been the owner of what was originally Caller's Curious Corner, and with my wife Peggy, now owns Supreme Audio, Hanhurst's Tape and Record Service, and Aztec Record Distributors. We are now full-time in this industry. I have, as they say, given up my day job. Very good. I would like to start without further ado, if I can ask Dick to lead off with his presentation, and I will even let you introduce what it is.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate it. How do you use one of these things anyway? Is it? Oh, okay. Now then, let's see. What I wanted to kind of go over the years, working at Hilton Audio Products, of course, we get a lot of questions, and one of the things that callers tend to be very educated as far as when they're shopping for equipment, as far as what they want. They know the right questions to ask because they can always check with their friends and everything. One of the things that their friends very rarely get into, and caller coaches very rarely get into, is the whole idea of repairing your equipment when you have problems. It's one of those things we hate to talk about, don't we, Bill? But it does happen, and I thought when I was asked to talk on this panel, I thought the thing I could probably do to offer the most to my fellow callers is to go over the whole concept of troubleshooting your equipment, because if you call long enough, you're going to have a problem at some point. It's not a question. It's kind of like driving a car. You know, eventually you're going to have a flat tire. When you do, you hope the spare is pumped up and everything's working, right? Well, it's the same thing with calling. A lot of it with your equipment is planning ahead. As much as anything, it's just planning ahead. And I've had it happen to me over the 18 years I've been calling. When you're in the middle of a dance and something goes wrong, the hardest thing to do is change your mind from thinking about where your corner's at to thinking about how do I analyze what's wrong with my equipment, how can I get back in working order the fastest that I can. And I know for me, the couple of times it's happened over the years, it makes you scramble because everybody, boy, I tell you, you think dancers are paying attention to you while they're dancing along. Wait until you have an equipment problem, and they all turn and stare at you and say, what the heck's going on up there? It is not a nice thought. It's tough, but it happens to us. So it's just a matter of being prepared as possible and to be able to jump in and analyze what's wrong. Not just think, oh, my God, I got a problem. Think about what is the problem? What exactly is wrong? And is it something that I can take care of right now and try to get right back into calling, or is it something that I have to go out and find another piece of equipment to try to finish up my dance tonight? The quicker you can analyze these things, the less time, obviously, you dancers are going to be standing out there staring at you or chatting about what happened at the baseball game yesterday. You want to get back into calling as quickly as you can. So, does everybody have one of the handouts that I have? As much as anything, it has some ideas in here that I would hope people would kind of keep and have a chance to go over a bit on their own, because a lot of it are ideas that we've picked up over the years, ideas that are in our instruction manuals that kind of help you, give you some troubleshooting ideas. And I just want to go over with you the approach that you want to take, okay? In the little pamphlet that I have here, the first thing I went into was just, I thought, well, how are we going to approach this? And I thought the best way is to give a little example. And say you're calling along and you notice a distortion in your sound system. What approach do you take to finding out the source of the problem? And the number one thing is to analyze, when you say distortion, oftentimes I've had calls and the guy says, I've got distortion in my amplifier. First thing I ask him, I says, is it in your music or is it your voice or both? And you have silence there for a minute. It's a normal response because the guy, normally you would notice it in your music first. And if you have a distortion, where do you go from there? Well, the number one thing is always to try to break it down. Break it down. If you notice a distortion, put on just the music. Okay, that's distorted. Put on your voice. Is that or is that not distorted? Because depending on what's wrong with your sound system, you may or may not have that problem. Another thing, too, is know your own equipment, the equipment that you have as an individual. Do you have a dual-channel sound system? Do you have a monitor channel? If you do, plug into it just as quick as you can. Try to get back into your dance going. If that gets you back going, great. Because then later on, you can always go back and find out what's wrong with the main channel as long as you can get back into going again. Because the key thing at a dance is to get that dance back up going again. So as you get into doing troubleshooting and you've made that change from being a caller 1 second to the next second being a repairman, eliminating all the things that you can is very, very important. I know when you go through electronics school, which is something I've worked in all my life, that's the approach a technician takes, whether it's a TV repairman or whatever. You're going to break down the equipment into different sections, try to eliminate sections as quickly as you can. On the second page of the little handout, you're going to see a little, not the fanciest drawing in the world, but it gives kind of a general breakdown of most sound systems that callers are going to be using. And one of the things I like to try to point out to people that is your voice, your music travels a straight line. I mean, it goes into this microphone, goes into this cord, goes into the sound system, goes through a preamp section, goes through a power amp section, goes out to the speaker through a cord to your speaker. Because it's a straight line, what we call a straight line system in electronics, you can kind of break it down into sections, split it into the middle or whatever. So as you're calling or working on a system that has a problem, in your troubleshooting, keep that in mind, that it is going in a single straight path, and anything in that path can cause the problem. Now then, in the little example I was talking about here where you notice a distortion, in the example, I kind of took the like I said, the first thing you're going to check is music and voice both distorted? Well, in the example, I picked voice just as a coin flip. So right away, not only does it tell you where to start looking, one thing I want to try to point out to people that aren't familiar with doing troubleshooting, it also tells you things not to test. And I think this is a very important idea I want to get across to people when they're trying to fix systems, especially under the circumstances that you have at a dance. And that is the idea that if your voice is distorted, your music is not. Should you check your speaker? Of course not. Otherwise the music wouldn't be clear. Don't waste time wiggling a speaker cord if the music's coming out clear. So these are the type of things you really need to keep in mind when you're doing troubleshooting, is that if part of it's coming out clear, then the things that are common to both the voice and the music obviously cannot be your problem. You do not have a bad speaker. You do not have a bad speaker cord. No sense changing the needle. Get into what is the problem, okay? So once you know, like in this example, you have a voice distortion, you know you've got what's left that's common just to that is your microphone cord, and your amplifier. Just from the experience I have, I can tell you that problems we have with microphone cords are very rarely a distortion problem. It's either working or not working, or it's intermittent, but a distortion is almost unheard of being caused by a cord. So it gets down to your microphone, your amplifier. Later on in my the little pamphlet I have here, I mentioned things that's a good idea to have as a backup. One of the things is I always think it's a good idea, if you can at all, even if it's a cheapy, can I say Radio Shack here? Is it okay? You're not going to, nobody's going to get mad at me? Even if it's a cheapy Radio Shack microphone, having a backup microphone that you can plug in and talk over can sure help you get through a dance, and it's a good idea. Also, if you're like me and your club president comes up and wants to talk and insists on blowing into your microphone before they talk, I'd rather hand them the Radio Shack microphone myself, and I think you probably would too, right? So you can get double purpose out of it as well as being a backup type of thing. So first thing you want to do is, in this example, is take out your second microphone, plug it in, see if you got a problem. And another thing too is if, like most Hiltons and most sound systems that we're using in square dancing, you usually have a separate microphone input. Plug into that second mic input. Find out if that's also got your problem. So these are the type of things that I want you to think about if you have a problem. I want you to think about it ahead of time, because I want you to be prepared. I don't want you to find a flat tire in your trunk when it's time to get back into going calling. So these are the approaches I want you to take. Find out exactly what is happening with your system. Before you can fix it, you got to find out what exactly is happening. Eliminating things is the best way to do that. Eliminate the things that cannot cause you problem. Throw out a couple other questions here. Why not? I already answered a couple of my own questions here. Well, the third one there was why, as far as the amplifier, the main parts of the amplifier, why the power amp section can't cause the problem is the same reason your speaker can't be the problem and everything. The music would not be playing good. So these are the approaches, and I want to get across to people. And I want to take some time on this, and Bill and I are in agreement. We want to have an open session a bit here to where people can ask questions. Also, if people have had ideas that they've seen, bring them up, let us know. If you can carry a certain number of spares, the things that I mentioned, people often ask me, well, I can't afford to have a whole backup of everything. What's the important things? Chords. Cords cause more problems than anything else in a normal PA system. And if you think about it, it is mainly because they get the most abuse. You're up there moving around up on stage. If you're a Mike Sikorsky and dancing all over the place, that cord's getting a heck of a workout every night. Speaker cords at the end of a dance, you got a helper, they get wound up 20 different ways at the end of a dance, right? Some of them wad them up and get all kinds of interesting combinations. But the cords take the most abuse. So if you have a backup speaker cord, a backup microphone cord, spare needle, these are the type of things, and you're not talking very much money. You're talking a very small amount of money, and they're going to cover 90% of the type of problems you're going to get into. Like I said, a backup microphone I personally feel is a good idea because you can also use it in other situations. Somebody else steps up there and wants to talk, hand them that microphone. A lot of people nowadays, microphone's a very personal thing. We get very close to our microphones. The idea of handing it to somebody else that is blowing into it and doing all types of things isn't real nice anyway, so it's a good idea to have a backup to have available for your club presidents and that type of thing. Those were the main things I wanted to get into, and like I said, the main thing I do want to do is have kind of a question and answer period on it, on specific problems that maybe some of you run into and all. Any questions? Right? Oh, okay. Yeah, we have to get the questions on the tape, so hang on just a second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Is there any way to overcome the pop when you turn a wireless mic off?
Okay. The way I do it, yeah, like you just did, that example. What I recommend, most of the wireless mics nowadays have a mute switch on them, okay? What I recommend to people, especially if they're working, obviously if you got a wireless mic, the main idea is to get away from your sound system, right? So you're out there anyway. What I recommend to people is turn the mute switch on, come up back on stage, and when you're up on stage, turn your volume off and then turn power off, and you won't get any popping through your sound system. All you're doing is leaving your transmitter on for a very short amount of time while it's in the mute position. The amount of time you're talking about is so minor anyway, it's no big deal, but that takes care of it. Basically, turning off your volume before you turn the power switch off will take care of that, and using the mute switch is helpful. Just make sure when you're through, turn the power switch off. Tend to go through batteries quick that way. Did I answer your question? Okay, great. Tom's got an idea here. Jump on in.
The other thing is, if you work with the wireless very much, I'm going to cover that a little later on, you can get used to turning it on and off and not have the pop if you turn the mute first. Then you won't have the pop even when you turn the system on. But you got, it's just working with it. We'll cover that in a little bit.
And the third alternative is to turn it off while they're giving you the standing ovation. Questions?
Yeah, Dick, I've got a 300 with the main amp and a monitor, and I'll use that monitor probably once every 2 years, maybe. Is that a problem? Is there a danger of it going bad from non-use, or is there?
Very good question. Very good questions. If you have a second channel set with a monitor, it's a good idea to check it once in a while. For the same exact reason, it's a good idea to periodically check your spare tire for it's got air in it, right? For the exact same reason. Because hello? Oh, I got turned off there. Thank you, Tom. Did I say something you didn't like? He's ready for his talk. Okay. When you have a second channel, yeah, very definitely periodically check it. It's a real good idea. The odds of a channel that's not being used going bad are much less than a channel you're using all the time. But it is possible for something to go bad and you not know about it. You could be used in a set for 3 months and not know the monitor channel's gone out on you. Then when you're ready to use it, it's gone. The other thing, while I'm on the subject real quick, if you have a spare amplifier, the same thing. If you have a spare amplifier that's sitting in your closet and that's what you're going to use for a backup, periodically take it out and use it for your dances for a week and just make sure it's in good working order also.
And also the volume controls on unused sections in your amplifier
I tend to get noisy.
will over time get noisy because they in fact sort of self-clean themselves with each use.
Exactly.
And it's very often useful if you would just simply go ahead and use the other channel, and it will sort of keep itself clean. Other
Right.
questions?
Dick, is there a difference in qualities of speaker cards, and what effect does it have on the reproduction of the sound?
That's kind of an ongoing argument. It depends on if you want to talk to some of the big thing now, like with audiophiles, is to use what they call monster cable for their. You've seen this. You got a 15 by 10 foot living room, and you have to run a cable that's as big around as your big finger to it. I personally do not believe that at all. In all of our experiments and testing, it doesn't make a hill of beans of difference. The one thing I will say, though, is if you're running long speaker cords at conventions, you do get an increased line loss if you go to a thinner cable. So if you're like Tom and I, where we're setting up big festival-type dances periodically, we always use a minimum of a 16-gauge wire for long runs. If you're only running for 10, 15, 20 feet or something, it really isn't going to make any difference. If you're running out over 50 feet to 100 feet, definitely use a heavy cable. And the difference is the line loss is the big problem. You do get line loss.
So you would say approximately 50 feet you should use a 16 gauge?
That's what
Just
we...
a rule of thumb?
That's what we use as a rule of thumb ourselves, yes. Yes. Anything over 50 feet, definitely use the heavy 16-gauge wire.
Okay, thank you.
Prior to asking a question, would you just briefly give your name and geography? Thank you.
Can you use, say I have 150 feet? Oh, sorry about that. No, I'm not sorry about it. I'm proud of it. My name is Joe Frisella, and I'm from Rhode Island. And say I have 150 feet, and I have a cord that's a heavy cord, thick cord of 100 feet, and a light line of 50 feet. Will that work?
Well, you're getting tough on me, huh, Joe? I would definitely try to find a heavier cable, personally. Yeah, very much so. It would work. Is it a good idea? No, not really. No, it's not a good idea when you get that long.
It's kind of like a chain. It's the weakest link.
Right, exactly.
Yes, Larry Kennard from Delaware. Two questions. Care, storage, transportation of cords, and then connection of, say, 50-foot length cords to cover 100 feet to 150-foot area.
Okay. Number one, I'm going to have you repeat the second question because I got a very short memory, Larry. Okay. The first question was about cords. The key thing with cords is not to do real sharp bends, and the big problem is always at the connector itself. People will be real careful about looping a cable. I know they can't see this on the tape, but if you loop a cable into a circle type of thing, that's the best way to carry cable because it does not have kinks in it, tight kinks in it. The worst is to do like a figure eight type of thing where you're really kinking it over, and be especially careful at the cord connection where it's coming out of the cord. And that's why we always try to put strain reliefs on like the base of the mic cords and all.
Okay, the second part was when you're connecting cables, say 2 to 3 50-foot length cables to cover all section.
Right.
The loss there from the connection.
In the connections, if you have good connections, there should be virtually no loss.
Just a quick reminder, if you're using a female, let's say on a quarter-inch cable, you're using a female-female adapter, which is obviously the easiest way to do it, tie what I'll call a single knot, tie a shoelace loop so that when they get pulled apart, it tightens the knot. Because if you end up, if somebody kicks that cable during your dance, unbeknownst to you, you can, although the quarter-inch plugs don't come out terribly easily, somebody could just jar that far enough apart that you get either partial connection or zero connection. And it's a real easy thing to do. Just loop it around once like you start to tie your shoelace so that it tightens up on itself. I can show you later if you want. Other questions out on the floor?
The other thing on that, when you buy your connectors, be careful whether you buy the stereo or the mono connector. It makes a big difference on what you're plugging up.
stick with manure. One more quick thing on that is we've run into that at conventions. We were doing a big 200 square hall one time, and some kids running around back unplugged some cords. Where people can actually get access to the cord, we actually take where you've got like the 1/4 inch connectors. If you have to use a coupler or something, take a piece of duct tape, wrap it once around it, and clamp it down. It's a bother when you have to take up at the end, but it makes it a lot more bother for somebody to pull apart and accidentally get kicked apart. But any of the ideas like that will sure help.
I'm R.T. Godfrey from Atlanta, Georgia. I'd like to find out about power generators. The last time I used one, Michael said it's been acting up ever since I used it.
If the problem was caused by the generator, I can guarantee you it'd be more than just acting up a little bit. Yeah, but the thing is with a power generator, if the power generator caused a problem, it would cause a problem to your power supply section, and that you would know. You would not be using your set right now. I would almost guarantee it's purely a coincidence that something else is happening now, because if you use a generator, it's 3 dances later you notice something. That generator didn't cause that. If during the time you're using the generator, the most common problems with generators occur when you're calling along and it runs out of gas. You don't think to unplug it, turn anything off. Somebody goes over and puts gas in, it cranks that sucker back up. And it's during the startup and the stop cycles of generators that they cause problems. Before they get locked in on their frequency and everything, they're throwing out all kinds of spikes. So the thing to do whenever you use a generator, get the generator up and going first, then plug into it and turn things on. And I very strongly recommend using the spike suppressor filtering type multi-power receptacles that you can buy that are mainly made for computer systems, but they work perfectly for our sound systems too, so that what you have coming out is clean. And that should eliminate 999% of any problems you'd have.
Johnny Burns, St. Louis, Missouri. Let's say you're traveling, you're gone over a week, and it's like a rainy season. You know, it rains every day. Does this possibly present any hazard to your equipment being exposed to heavy moisture over a long period of time when you're
Right. Moisture is, if you live in a damp climate or have had a lot of rain, yes, you're going to have more of a tendency to have a problem than somebody that lives, say, in Arizona or something where it's dry most of the time. And that's true over a long period of time, mainly, because the danger with a damp climate is corrosion. People that use their set very regularly, if you're calling a couple, 2 or 3 times a week, you probably won't have any problems at all because you're plugging things in and out. You're, like Bill mentioned earlier, you're moving your pots are being exercised, being used. Highly unlikely you're going to have too many problems. People that tend to, say somebody leaves a set sitting for a month and it's in a damp climate or it's in a garage. You might live in a dry climate, but it's sitting in a washroom area or something like that that's damp. Yes, you can very definitely have problems. The metal will start corroding fairly quickly, and if it's sitting there for a few weeks, by the time you go to turn around and plug it in, nothing's working, and it's because of corrosion. Sure, it very definitely be a problem.
Sorry. Last 2 questions coming up. We'll then move on, and we'll come back to more questions at the end. 2 questions over here.
Doug Mallory, St. Louis, Missouri. On the rubber drive wheel on the 300, underneath the turntable, what's the best thing to clean that with? I use a dry rag, and it doesn't a lot of times seem to clean it as well as it should.
Right. The easiest and quickest thing to buy that I recommend is just go to a store and get... is that the rubbing alcohol type of thing that you can buy for that? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, isopropyl. Isopropyl. Thank you. Isopropyl. That's good. I have to remember that one. Isopropyl alcohol. Anyway, that you can buy for 88 cents and will last you forever if that's the only thing you're cleaning it with. But that on a clean cloth or even a paper towel works very good for cleaning off the drive wheel as well as the bottom of the platter. And you can also use it for cleaning off your mic cords, things like that. When they tend to get dirty. Records, really, I've never used it for records, but if it works, I'll take your word for it.
Mike Kramer, Racine, Wisconsin. I know you were talking about generators before. What has your experience been with power inverters, where you would take a 12-volt car battery and hook it up to it? I've seen it in use before. Do you recommend those more, and where would you find them?
I have very little experience with them to be able to tell you much about it. Most people, when they call in, they ask about generators. So we've done a fair amount at Hilton Audio testing generators and everything and doing different things. So I'm fairly up on generators. Inverters, I know people are using. I've played around with them a little bit. They seem to work. The big problem with them is they do tend to have a less... a lot of them, especially cheaper ones, to be more of a square wave output than a true sine wave output, which can make your motor run real noisy and things like that. Here again, if I was using one personally, I would definitely put the surge protector and filtering on it, and the filtering would even be more important on it because the inverters tend to be more of a square wave output than a sine wave.
I'm John Chevalier from Dayton, Ohio, and I've used an inverter for about 12 years, successfully, except for one case where the battery on the car died. It blew the inverter. I happened to have a Clinton at that time. It blew the Clinton, and it was not a happy time. It was in the middle of a parade, too. But they do work. You do occasionally get a 60-cycle hum out of them. But I have used it, and Trip Light makes them, among others.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn this back over to Bill. Thank you.
Would you join me in giving a big hand for Dick Henschel? That was superb and very needed. I don't think we've ever had the pleasure of having a presentation on that subject, and it's something that is absolutely critical to all of us. We've all been caught in the bind at some point in time, and Dick's comment that it really focuses your dancer's attention. I've never seen dancers stare so intently as when something happened to a speaker cable or something like that. We will be coming back to questions at the very end, so if you think of additional things, just make a quick note of them on the back of your flyers, and we do want to move on to make sure that our other two participants have adequate time. I'd like to now turn the program over to Ervin Gross, who will make his presentation.
Hello, testing. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I don't have the habit of using a microphone like you. I'm out of place in this thing. Anyway, talk about the directional characteristics of column loudspeakers and some of other speakers too, with the attempt to give you some familiarity with what the column speaker can do. Now, I'm not talking about a yak stack or a Supreme or anything. I'm talking about column speakers. And if the word yak stack slips in, I apologize. The first curve here is what we call a horizontal directional characteristic of a column speaker. That means if you... Where'd the speaker go? There it is. All right. Oh, don't get too close now. Okay. Horizontal directional characteristic. Measure around the speaker in a horizontal position. You measure around the loudspeaker in a horizontal position, and it gives you the sound output of the speaker. This is the speaker, and this is the direction. This is the sound level as you rotate about the column. And you notice here that it has fairly uniform output over a range of like 120 degrees. Now, that's determined by the width of the column. The column there is about 8 by 8 by 24 inches maybe. It's the 8-inch dimension that determines how wide this is. And the other characteristic that we're interested in, and I think is important, was a column speaker, is what we call a vertical directivity factor pattern. And there it's measured by going around the speaker the long way of the speaker. Now, and then you come out with a little narrow band of sound level. And what we call the bandwidth is when the level falls 2 to 1 or 6 dB. And then we call that the bandwidth of the array. And see, this is for a 60-inch tall column. And then that comes out about 30 inches, 30 degrees. If we were to go to a 90-degree column, a 90-inch column, we'd end up with 25 degrees. We go to half of this column here, we end up with like 60 degrees. So the taller the column, the narrower this beam comes out. And this is the one that we control by tilting, so that you can aim, instead of at the center of the wall and back, you can aim it at the junction between the floor and the back wall. And then your echoes do not come back directly at you, but they'll get lost coming back across the floor. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, I can't explain it to you easily. But the more speakers you have in this array, it goes up here, they combine and add up for the center, and then you get the array effect. And, if you have just what they call a point source, for instance, which would be a single spot, if we put 1,000 watts out of it, it would radiate in all directions. It would be absolutely useless to sound a hall, because it would just bounce off everything. Now, these measurements are very difficult to make. You can't make them in a hall like this. You have to make them what is known as a free field. And that's where you assume there's no floor, no ceiling, no walls, no back connections. And so there's nothing for the sound to bounce off. So you have the direct output of the speaker. And it's called an anechoic space. And these are quite expensive to maintain. The horizontal directivity factor is not too hard to make. But if you take a 60-inch tall column and start rotating it in this direction, it takes a pretty good sized turntable to do that. It takes pretty good sized room, so you don't have effects from the wall. There's some more information on the same directivity characteristics. If you measure the fall off in sound from the loudspeaker, every sound source, starting at some point, or starting at any point, as you double the distance from the source, you will decrease the output of sound level by 2 to 1, or 6 dB. Well, I'll stick to 2 to 1. With a conventional speaker say, are 15 inches. And then these measurements have to begin at at least two times the major dimension of the speaker before they're valid. Otherwise, the other things interfere with the measurement, and you don't get the true measure of how much the sound will fall off. If you take a conventional 15-inch speaker, the dotted curve here, this shows the curve starting at about 116 decibels, 3 feet in front of the speaker, and you back off 6 feet, 12 feet, 30, 24 feet, and so forth. That's how the sound falls off. And you find out that starting way up here at 112 dB, 116 dB, sound falls off to something below 80 dB, 85 dB by the time you've gone 70 feet. And this is one of the reasons you have a problem with a conventional speaker. The sound falls off pretty rapidly. But an added advantage of a column speaker that came as a surprise to me when I first figured it out was that if you start the measurement at 2 times the major dimension of a 60-inch column, you start way out here at 20 feet. Now when you double it, you're to 40 feet. Double it again, you're to 80 feet. So you get quite an... In fact, you can maintain sound level, usable sound level, for over 150 feet. Just by aiming the column and having the narrow vertical beam. Another way that this helps is that you use this fall off and plot it from a column speaker 10 feet up on the wall, and then these are the numbers that come off of this curve. You just come out here like this. But if you start up here and aim that speaker down here near this junction, the sound level actually calculates to be 95, 94, 93, 94, 94. That's almost constant 94 dB level for the whole distance. This is one of the big advantages of a column speaker. You get it up in the air, aim it down like this. You're well out of the main beam of the speaker here, so the level drops at the caller's level and at the dancer's ear level. So there's another big advantage of a column speaker. This is another effect that you get with a narrow beam, vertical beam, versus the wide beam of the conventional speaker. The conventional speaker, if you take the 120 degree band or angle that it extends, it gets its first contact with the floor and the ceiling about the same place. And this is a high ceiling too, 35 feet. It gets the first contact in about 20 feet. And by the time you get out here to 50 to 75 feet, you've had many, many reflections off the wall and the ceiling. With a 60-inch column, that same sort of array brings you to 50 feet before you get your first strike. Then the reflection comes back here, so you get just one direct sound gets to the dancer without interference of reflections, just by using this narrow beam that you get out of the column. Now I've plotted here a series of column speakers. This is the fall off with distance of the sound level. And for comparison's sakes, we do this. And you take a 15-inch conventional speaker, you get the dotted curve. You take a 60-inch column, that's curve number 3, which I left off. 1, 2, 3. Number 3 brings you to this one here. So you get out to this point, which is a useful sound level. I've drawn a heavy line here at 90 dB sound level. This is the level you can get out of the speaker with a 20-watt amplifier. The numbers are all in your handout. And if you want to go long distances, you put one column on one jack stack on top of the other, for instance, and you get a 120-inch column, and that will stay well above the useful range way out beyond 300 feet. And we've used this system a couple of times. We haven't gone quite as far as using four units. I've used 1.5 or 3 units. And I've used that in the hall. 300 feet long and dance 350 squares. We used that in the center of the hall, and then we used 2 conventional columns on the corners of the hall to fill in the front corner. And this is a very useful worksheet that I've been using for many years. The fact that the longer the column is, the further you get out from the column before you start to measure how far it goes down. Plus the fact that it goes down at a slower, it means that it goes out quite a bit further before it drops below a useful level. Now I've gone through very crudely and quickly the main features of what I think of a column speaker, and then I thought I would show you roughly sort of a cookbook way of setting up the column speaker to sound various size halls. If you have any questions on the directivity part of it, let's have those now. Yes.
Thank you. Ken Brennan, London, Ontario. In setting up a speaker for a hall shaped similarly to this one, reasonably normally shaped hall, but considerably larger, would you recommend just using the stack straight in the center, or as I often see it, people spread them, separate that stack, and one on either side of the hall, about a quarter in from the edges?
I'll come to that. That's in my next picture.
Okay. I didn't mean to jump ahead, but there's something that seemed to show right here.
Yeah.
That you're looking at one speaker right in the center.
Yeah, well, if you keep the aspect ratio, that's pretty good, but if you get a little wider here, you'll find that you may have a little weakness in these corners here. And depending on the caller, some people claim they can't hear, other people have no problem. But it's true the sound level right in these corners does go down a bit. So on a larger hall than this, I typically put half of or 30-inch column here and here and tilt them severely so they aim at a point right back here rather than the back wall. So I just use them as fill-in for the corner. the single speaker in the center is not enough, then I do it that way. And I usually aim the speaker, I call it aim, about a third the way in from the edge of the hall, rather than aim it straight ahead. One reason is that if you aim it straight ahead, you still, even though you tilt it, I've shown it tilted here, even though you tilted it, some of the echoes will come back and just disturb the caller more than the dancer, because he can hear it coming right back as a pretty sharp echo in that time. Now I've given some dimensions here of typical halls. I haven't given the width, but usually it's the length that determines how long a column you need. And my usual procedure is I figure out what the volume of the hall, what the area of the hall is, and what the length of the hall is. And I use this previous curve to determine whether a 60-inch column should throw that far before I get into trouble, or and then I take the area and divide it by 144. That's estimating 12 feet on the side for a square. And if the number comes out 100 or less, I assume that I'll be able to sound that hall with one column, one 60-inch column. As it gets bigger and bigger, say it comes out 298. You definitely would need 3 columns, possibly 4, depending on the shape of the hall. But that's conservative usually. Now these halls are all such that you would probably use one column speaker. If you go down below 50 square feet, below 50 squares, you could possibly get by with a 30-inch column. Yeah.
Jim Schmondelay. Would you say that one of our problems in sounding halls is over-sounding halls rather than under-sounding halls?
Yes.
Could you talk to that a little bit?
Sure, I hadn't planned to, but I will. I'm of the opinion that the minimum amount of equipment to do the necessary job is always the best. If you get... See, nothing is perfect, and no room is perfect. And if you're getting reflections and interferences because of something in the ceiling or something on the wall, and you think just adding another speaker will do it, you're wasting your time, because you just added to the confusion. That's the way I feel about it. And if you can keep it down to, can do it with one column speaker or one regular speaker if you need to, or use other speakers to aid, but there are many times where the hall is large enough, so in order to get that much energy out of in the space, you need more than 2 speakers. But many times I've been at conventions, especially where I have known what I estimated to use in the hall. I would go and find where I had thought I could use 3 column speakers and have adequate, very good coverage. I found 5. In fact, in one convention that I attended, at the last minute, we got an order of 10 60-inch column speakers from the chairman of the committee. And we got to the festival, and we found 5 of those units in one hall smaller than this.
and 5 others in a similar size hall, and it was a horror show. Nobody could hear.
I can relate to that real well. I just called a dance at a hall where they set the sound up for me, and knowing that I'm with Keltone, they used Yak Stack speakers. But they set the sound up, and we had 4 Yak Stacks on a stage, not as wide as this room, and we had 2 Yak Stacks on either side of the hall over there. So we're talking about 8 Yak Stacks, and they said, the sound in this hall is terrible. You know, we've never had any good sound. And, I just sort of shook my head, and after the first tip, I went around and I unplugged the side Yak Stacks, unplugged 2 of the Yak Stacks on there, called the next tip. They said, boy, the sound's improved so much here. What'd you do? Your voice must be really clear. So you can oversound something real easy.
Our last question, and then I am going to have to cut it short. Last question here.
Just a very quick question. I'm sorry, Dick Mazziotti, Hillsdale, New Jersey. Very quick question. Under all other things being equal, are you saying from those charts that the higher and the more severely tilted a column speaker is, the better the sound is going to be?
Not necessarily. If you get the speaker too high, then the people in front are not going to hear. And the caller is not going to hear. I try to arrange any hall that I provide sound for. I try to arrange at least one speaker as this one. The caller, this represents the caller, by the way. Can use that as a monitor, as he calls. And usually I try to arrange it so that the level at that point is the same as you would get in the middle of the floor. And so I instruct the callers that just assume that what you hear, the audience or your dancers are hearing. And I don't have any problems with that. And they usually adjust pretty well. First hall I ever set up, and the one I have the most information on since. I set it up in that fashion, and the caller was calling the first tip, and people all complained that the sound was too loud in the rear. And so I spoke to the caller. I said, they're complaining because it's too loud in the back. And he said, well, gee, he says, I'm pushing as hard as I can. I go, don't. I said, just assume that the people in your dancers can hear just what you're hearing. And it was fine.
Very good. Thank you, Ervin. I really don't want to cut you short, but the time is really fleeting along, and we've had a lot of really good questions, and we have another very important segment coming up. Join me in giving a big hand for Ervin Gross. Next, I'd like to present to you Tom Dillander from Palomino.
Check. Got a minor problem with the mic cord, believe it or not. We have a repairman right here. He's grounding it. We're in good shape. Be easier. Okay, I got one here. Anyway, basically what I'm going to try to cover is information on microphones. I'm going to fix the tone. There we go. It's a lot better. A little more crisp. In the handout, I did give you some information. The technical side of it, I'm going to let you take that home and absorb it on your own. I'm not going to cover a lot of the technical side of it, other than to remind you of a couple things. One thing I'm going to say, and it will probably come back to haunt me, but if you ever had the opportunity to take a microphone apart, open it up and look at it, I don't recommend that you do it. So if you could see the inside of it, you would appreciate your microphone a lot more. You would find out how delicate it is on the inside, where the magnets are, where the generating element, if you could. So, and this was an afterthought about making the copies of this, but I'll have this line up if you want to look at it. But you would lay it down a lot easier. You would wrap it in foam. You would take care of it a lot more. Okay, enough said on that side of it. One of the things I do want to cover is the fact that a microphone is nothing more than an acoustic transducer. It's taking sound and converting it to electrical energy. The speaker, after the turntable through the preamp, is taking that energy and converting it back to sound. Okay? So keep in mind, what you do get in there is going to come back out. It may change a little, but you've got to get it in there. Okay? A lot of that has to do with the microphone, with the caller, cuer, whoever's using the microphone. Okay? A lot of it has to do with the proximity effect. You can talk out here and lose it, these type of microphones, or you can put it here where you should and get most of your voice going in there. We're on. All right. Still did a good job of grounding it. Okay. When you're dealing with the microphones, we want to cover a couple things as far as the generating element's concerned. And I'm going to cover these, and I'm going to do a lot of demo. I'm going to walk around and showing you some other microphones and how they work. The fact is, we deal with dynamic diaphragms for the most part in what we work with. The other side of it, these are the cardioid. The other side of it is the condenser microphones, either the lapels or the handhelds, the wireless systems or the condenser microphones. If you are out working with a large group and they're all singing at one time, you've seen the choirs and what have you, they're working with an omnidirectional type of microphone. Picks up, if you can imagine this microphone in a balloon, it's picking up from all around. That's where it can pick up from. We're working with a unidirectional. It's like a heart shape, okay? Doesn't get anything from down here. Be very successful that way. It's got to come in here. With the way it's put together, it's got openings on the side internally to pick up anything that gets past this screen. Okay? And that's the important part. We talk a lot this way with the microphone. It works fine. We're getting across it, and it's picking it up. If you want to really project, the microphone should be in front of you. You know, a lot of you have been through the mic techniques straight out. Okay? You'll see a lot of the callers, they'll talk like this. And they'll try to call like this, and they have a hard time. Next thing you know, they're over here adjusting things, and next thing, what happens? Feedback, exactly. Okay? Where if they move it an inch, one more inch makes tremendous amount of difference. Just an inch. Get it up there. You know, don't have to ride on the chin, but it does need to get pretty close. Don't have to have your mouth all in it, but it does need to get close. When you're trying to pick out microphones, you want to be interested in the pickup patterns. You want to be interested in the fact of the frequency response, the impedance of it, whether it be a low impedance or a high impedance. We typically work with low impedance microphones. A couple of good reasons why is we like to get away from our turntables a little bit. With a high impedance microphone, you got to have the adapters and what have you. If you want to go any distance, these work really good with it. I'm going to switch microphones on you, and if this works, if I got the mixer set up right, we shouldn't have too much of a problem. There we go. Okay, we went from an EV257 to an EV457. Okay, if you're not familiar with the Electro Voice, they're excellent microphones. The point being, the reason I went to the 457, it's what we call hotter. You know, what's hot and what's not. Okay, the output is so much better with this. Now, what happens is you still got to get in there. It's not going to be any better if I use it out here at all. Okay. But it is going to take care of what I'm saying and control it a lot better. The only difference is it's a tighter pattern. You can't work very far away from it. You've got to work with it. You've got to work through it. Okay, when you're working with these type of microphones. Same way with the CTM Eddy, with the static. Okay? Can't work out here. Can't work here too well unless you want to turn up and get the feedback. Got to work into the microphone, work with it a little bit. And if this works out, I'm going to move around a little bit. We're going to change things quite a bit. Folks were asking about the wireless systems. Notice there was no click, and I have not checked this out. Normally I should be walking through here and checked it out before all of you got in here. Don't pay much attention to me. Listen to what's coming out of the speaker, and you'll be okay, because I'm going to move around quite a bit. You were talking about wireless systems a while ago, and they're getting more popular every day, whether it be a Samson, Electro Voice, a Telex system, whatever you're using. Very popular. They are not toys. Not toys. You know, I have been known to call it an expensive toy, but it's not a toy. Okay, they're great, except if you want to be calling a dance and you're singing and you decide to go 150 feet away, you're in trouble. Okay, folks up front are going to hear, but you're going to have a delay and you're going to have trouble singing with the song. Okay, but they are excellent to play with. Here comes the real test. Yeah, which pocket I'm working with. Okay, the headsets. This happens to be an AKG plugged into a Samson system. Very effective. Very good response. Now, everything is set equal up there. I'm not adjusted anything, one high, one low. I've left them all the same so that you can get the difference in them. These are very comfortable. Obviously, you got your hands free. You can go out and you can work with your dancers. You can work with your students. You can have a ball. You can go around and visit people. You can start your record, do your song, lay things down. You can start out with the handheld in your hand like you're using it, and then lay it down, walk away, whatever you want to do. Very effective. One of the things we have to caution you, though, on the wireless systems is if you're using more than one, please use different channels. Don't use the same channel in the same hall at the same time. We have a lot of folks that like to use a handheld and like to have a headset both. Well, that's great. You can do that. Please turn one of them off when you're using the other. You'll only do it about one time. Okay? And it'll really get you. They don't give you studio sound. Okay? If you're looking for the studio sound, you're going to have to get to some different type of microphones that have the flat response. Keep in mind when you're in a studio, it's dead silent in there. Okay? We're used to working with noise, room noise. We have to be careful with the type of microphones we're using. We want the type that doesn't pick up very far away. These type here, if you're dancing with somebody, if you're round dancing, your partner will not be picked up if she's talking or he talking. They're that good. The range is about this far, and that's it. Everything else is not even audible. So you have to be careful there. Covering this real quick because I know we got run out of time. I want to get through some questions for you. Interference with wireless systems. You're occasionally going to run into some. If you want to really be on the safe side, go to True Diversity. But in my 8 years of using wireless systems, I've only had to change out 2 systems from a standard antenna to a True Diversity. That doesn't mean it'll work every time, but it does work quite a bit. Interference, you don't ever interfere with the microphone plugged in the turntables. You don't have to worry about that. You can have 6 of those plugged in. You can run 5 or 6 through a mixer board, no problems. The great thing about this one is it doesn't change very much. I mean, I could go to the next room and talk to you. You might wonder if I'm coming back. But you can move around with these things. It's really versatility if you're in flexibility if you're looking for it. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure which one we're going to kill, so I think we're going to kill the handheld. I'm still on, so go ahead. It's okay. All right. Now we've got the lavalier on, okay? Lavaliers are extremely touchy. Not a technical term, but I'll show you why. If I try to get up here very close and work with anything, if I haven't made any adjustments and they're all equal, we're going to have some problems. notice that it changed real quick on the voice. Okay. Now, I know to avoid that, and fortunately you don't have to give this one to the president to make an announcement. We really would be in trouble. We had to hand over lapels. We'd be it's interesting. We're talking about handing your microphone to somebody. Watched the Michael Jackson show a few weeks ago, and when he was growing up, I forget the young lady that talked to him and said, never give your microphone to anybody. And that's probably one of the best things you can remember about microphones. Don't give it to anybody. Anyway, the lapel, if you avoid that, and if you adjusted it properly, it works okay unless you want to talk over here. Okay? You lost about half of me. Doesn't mean I have to talk like this all night long if I want to talk to you and walk around or anything like that. You kind of wonder about me a little bit. But you can adjust them to work fairly well. And they've now got them so sophisticated that literally you can put it on the top of your head, hide it in your hair if you have any, and use them.
Excuse me?
And it works out really good. Again, notice the pickup's pretty good on it. You know, the range is all right. It's just that you lose a little bit. Now, what I mean by that is I feel like we've lost quite a bit. We've lost quite a bit of tone control. You don't have to be too concerned about that because Dick has some nice features built into the turntable to help you take care of that, called tone controls. Don't be afraid to use those things. If I'm still on, they are great. In fact, Dick, if you want to, you can adjust me a little bit. They're great to use. In fact, I'll stay up here so he does make the adjustment. Okay? Use those. Don't be afraid to use those. One of the things that I see the most is I walk up and somebody's using their equipment. The knob is straight up. It's never been moved. They got this microphone, but they just don't like it. It just doesn't sound like the guy that he bought it from. Or Tony was using this microphone the other night, and I want one just like it. I want to sound just like him. Well, you tell him two things. One is it ain't going to do it. Okay. Yeah. But if you want to sound good, yes, you could buy that microphone, but don't leave everything straight up. You may have to make some adjustments for it. Each microphone is different. I set the sound levels the same, but the tone is entirely different. Every one of them has a different type magnet inside of here. Okay? And based on the way the generating element is working, based on the output of that, you've got to adjust for that. Okay? Don't be afraid to adjust for it. Okay? I got a little bit more meat here. I'll probably get just a little bit fuzzy as I work back here with the lapel. Okay? Again, well, it's not too bad. It's working out pretty good. Better than I thought. But at least we adjusted for it. If he takes it back to where it was, I'll be very shallow. Ladies, for those of you that use the microphones, you typically have what we call the thin voice. Okay? You're going to want something that has a little better proximity effect, a little better bass boost to it. Okay? I'm not sure this one's still on. 1, 2. 1, 2. I guess we're not. I'm not sure. The AKGs have a little better bass response. The Electro Voice has a little better bass response. A good example is like the 635. Does not. Okay? That doesn't mean it's not a good microphone. It's an excellent microphone. Adjust it. Don't be afraid to adjust those controls. Make you sound good. Don't make the microphone do all the work. It won't. Same goes with the way you use it. Your mic techniques. Okay? You've got to use those things. Don't just feel like you can plug it in and you're set. And I know a lot of us get in a hurry at the dance. We run in, we set up, we plug in, we take off. We never even look back until we're already out here somewhere, and it's lousy. Take the time to make the adjustments. Okay? Any questions? I'll get it. We have plenty of cords. Short one electrical cord. You can take either one of them. You should be on. You're not. Probably not. What channel is that?
That's called feedback.
Check, test. There's a question back here.
I'm Joe Esquivel from Enterprise, Alabama. My question isn't on microphones, really. It's more directed to the yak stack. I've got a half yak. I've got 2 half yaks. Can I convert those into a single stack?
You mean permanent?
Yeah, permanent. I've used a halves. That's all I need is halves. But I have had 1 or 2 occasions that I could have used a full stack. And in fact, I put them together, and I couldn't tell much difference in the sound. But I know there is. And could I convert both of them? Convert them to make a full stack out of it?
You can do that, but it's probably better if you buy a whole new stack and sell it at half. No, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. It's better for you, and you'll have a full unit than if you try to put these 2 together, because the chances are that the halves were made at different times. The tolerance on the cabinets, you may be lucky and have them match. Then you have to add all the hardware, and then you have to move speakers around if you want to make it like a yak stack.
You can cheat, however. You can, using 2 stands. We've done it before. Use 2 stands and basically sort of nest them in the configuration. It is certainly not a perfect solution.
No, we can do it.
And the line is obviously not a perfect line, but you can do that, and will be doable.
Hello, I'm Joe Frisella from Rhode Island. I have a question for Ervin. Ervin, several times I've been in large auditoriums, say 100 feet or over, with very high ceilings, and there seems to be echoing. So from a friend caller, he said use a reverse phase on the speaker in back and put one down the other end and one on this side, and it seemed to work very well.
Oh, I'm sure it may have worked all right, but I don't think reversing the phase did any good for you. Because I've tried hanging speakers at opposite ends of halls with a reversing switch, and I can't tell the difference when you do it. That's my own experience.
Well, I've had very good luck, and I don't know why.
Use it then.
Okay, thank you.
Can we stick with questions to microphones for the moment, okay? And then we'll come back to speakers in a minute or 2. No, go ahead. Finish up. Do your question, please.
John Burns, St. Louis. Irving, if you go to a hall, set up your sound, and it sounds good, if you have an enormous crowd, is this going to distort the sound that you've set up already? I don't think so. If you set it up properly, most of the crowd is going to be underneath the main output of the speakers. And I have never noticed much difference between an empty hall and the full hall. Of course, if you get the speaker down low, and you lose everything gets lost in the front rows. Yes, that will happen. But if you get it high enough, I think it'll be all right.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on microphones first? Any other general questions? Okay, let me get somebody else to up before. The gentleman in blue on the aisle there, and then the gentleman way back, about 3 rows back. Thank you.
Lee White from Illinois. I'd kind of like you guys to elaborate on that phasing of speakers. I've heard conflicting reports. Maybe we can get Hilton's opinion in this too.
We've done it both ways at festivals, and it's been our experience that when you fire speakers from the front of the hall and the back of the hall, what you end up with is a section about 5 feet wide down across the middle, in which you can hear both speakers. As soon as you step to one side or the other, you only hear the speaker on that side. And it's a kind of a fun test to do if you've never done that, particularly in a big hall. And we've tried it phased, out of phase, didn't make any difference. You have this effect where they're both going into the middle. You have as long as your balance is correct to where they're both driving equally, we have not noticed any difference whether it's in phase or out of phase, because you're still going to have this 5 foot or so roughly area down the middle where you're going to hear both, and as soon as you step to the other side, you don't even know that other speaker is there. The one thing I will say for people that do this type of thing, be aware of the fact that those dancers that are dancing in that area, as you're moving through a square, you're moving through a fairly large area. And for some dancers, if their square happens to be set up right in the middle of that, they're going to be moving from hearing front speakers to both speakers to the other set of speakers, right, as they move around the square. And psychologically, this is a problem, because you'll have some dancers come up and say, God, it seemed weird, but I was dancing there and it just really seemed... And it is weird. It's a strange effect. And for dancers that aren't aware of what's going on, they can hear everything. They can hear every command, but it is a strange effect. And you can do it yourself sometime in a hall. Try it, because it works very well. The phasing doesn't make any difference as far as I've ever seen. But you do have to be aware that you're going to probably have some dancers come up to you and mention that to you. And as long as you take the time to explain that to them, ask them, could you understand the caller? The answer is going to be yes. So
it's like anything else, though, from a sound standpoint. If you can avoid it, avoid it.
Yeah, if you can sound one side of the hall rather than both, certainly avoid it. There's always that alternative. I had one hall that I called in for the home club where I just had to do it. I had no choice. I frankly have used what I call the phase changer, and I thought it helped in that hall. I'm not challenging the other opinion, but I frankly thought it helped in that particular hall. But I'm not certainly arguing the electronic theory.
There was one thing that I've noticed, that if you have sound coming from the front of the hall, sound coming from the back of the hall, the audience doesn't hear this, but I'm sure the caller gets it as an amplified echo.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, I'm sorry, was there a question, sir? Yeah, in the back. Thank you very much.
Howie Fox from Billboard, Wisconsin. We get kind of cold weather, and if you take your amplifier after the dance and put it in your trunk and stop somewhere, by the time you get home, that's cold. Now when you take it from the cold to the warm and it sweats, what is that going to do to it, and how do you prevent it, or how do you get it back to where it should be without being wet inside?
Yeah, what he's describing is the same effect you have if you have a glass of cold water on a summer day and it's got condensation on the outside. Normally, it doesn't cause a problem. Occasionally, if some moisture gets in the wrong spot internally, it can cause a problem. That problem will be there until the moisture goes away, which is usually about a half hour or so. Yeah, it can cause a problem. The way around it, I've talked to some people that live in Canada, Alaska. We have units in use up in Nome and Yellowknife, places like that, where it gets very cold, from what I understand. And what I tell those people, and it works, so we don't argue with it, I say, if you're carrying it in your car, you're warm up front, aren't you? Set your amplifier up in the front part of the car with you instead of in the cold trunk. If it's comfortable temperature-wise for you, you're not going to have this condensation effect, and it does work. But yes, you're absolutely correct. But it's going to be different every time because of the fact that the moisture may or may not form in a certain part of the circuitry and all. It may or may not cause a problem.
Thank you very much. We've really run out of time. It's just 3 o'clock now, actually a minute or two after 3, and refreshments are getting ready. First of all, I'd like to ask you to thank the members of this panel very much. Thank you very much. As you can see, there is a great deal of audio expertise, not only on this panel, but people like Jim Cholmondeley from Keltone, Dick over here, formerly of Halpo. Take advantage of that knowledge and ask us questions.